Welcome to the Gold Newsletter Podcast, your bank of knowledge of investment, economics, and geopolitics. Go to goldnewsletter.com for our publications and archives.
This is the Gold Newsletter Podcast. Fergus Hodgson, your host. I'm so delighted to be with you. Please go to goldnewsletter.com/podcast and you can find all our archives. You can also find ways to subscribe, be it YouTube, SoundCloud, Spotify, BitChute, whatever platform you like, we're on there. And we are discussing today stakeholder capitalism with the amazing Paz Gómez, or Maria Paz Gómez of Ecuador. She has many hats, you might say. She's engaged in many endeavors. She's the co-founder of Libre Razón. That's a classical liberal think tank that's 2 years old in Quito, Ecuador. She is a research associate with the Frontier Center for Public Policy, and she is a policy analyst with Econ Americas. So she has written an article for the Frontier Center. It's titled Stakeholder Capitalism Sleight of Hand, and I'm just so pleased to have you on, Paz. Thanks for giving us your time.
Hi, Fergus. Thanks very much for inviting me to the podcast. It is my second time here, and I am very glad to share with you about this article.
Yes, we should get the last one on. You discussed, was it Women in Finance? What was the last one?
It was about identity politics.
Identity politics. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't shy away from the philosophy of capitalism, which is what I love, and I love your courage. On the show, we always discuss basically a mix of finance and economic freedom or capitalism. And Paz's article for the Frontier Center really is a historic one. I highly recommend it. So if you listen to this and you like it, the link will be in the show notes. And it is really, in my view, a classic piece. So I hope it gets plenty of coverage or plenty of readers. There were two events you noted that stimulated you to write about this or made you want to write. Why is this issue of stakeholder capitalism so relevant now?
Yes, in 2019, I think it was in August, there was the Business Roundtable, which joins the main CEOs of different corporations in the United States. And also in January 2020, there was the World Economic Forum meeting in Switzerland that also joins a lot of important people and CEOs. And in both meetings, they discussed about the importance of now thinking about stakeholder capitalism, which means not just focusing about shareholders, but also about other kind of participants in the process of production and operation of companies.
So these two major events took place. You described this as virtue signaling. So this article does not pull any punches. And the problem with this virtue signaling is what? People trying to show that they're good or moral or virtuous. Why is that a concern to you? I mean, what's wrong with showing that you're a moral person?
It's fine to show that an individual is a moral person as long as it is first voluntarily and second as an individual. When we're talking about companies have, especially talking about companies that have shareholders behind them, we're talking about more interest and we're talking about making profit. That is the way companies live and survive and even can grow and, get economies of scale and becoming better. So what makes a concern about talking about this idea of companies concerning about moral principles and social responsibility is that they are going to get a part of their main goal, that is making profit and becoming better in the market, which also means to improve different procedures and different products, services, and even the relations with other stakeholders in order to become better. But the final end is to gain profit, not to be social responsible in the sense of guidelines made by any of these alliances of CEOs or the governments.
Yeah, the challenge is that I fear that this promotion of stakeholder capitalism is really a dangerous trend for chief executives. They are inviting meddling in the corporate affairs. Your discussion really is about the fundamental misunderstanding of capitalism. So there are really two ideas you put forward, or two maybe erroneous understandings. One is that there is a trade-off between serving shareholders and the broader economy. And your contention, I guess, is that serving shareholders does serve the economy, that's actually what's most efficient or productive. And the second is that there is this assumption that somehow having this stakeholder approach will, in the end, actually make companies more efficient. In that case, that's not the case. So basically, that it will not make the companies more efficient. So do you want to clarify what's going on there?
Yes. Regarding the first one, we have seen that innovation, that market innovation, has driven us to better conditions of life in much of the cases. I guess it is a proof and error dynamic, and we have better, not such better solutions. But at the end, this dynamic of producing, creating, innovative, and of course, customers purchasing and requesting these services that are better for customers have in fact driven us to prosperity. And the usual dynamic or the usual modus operandi of companies have been creating profit, serving shareholders in the sense that getting profit for them, and keep financing companies, keep increasing or growing, expanding the companies, and at the end, having more capability to innovate and to generate other things that are perhaps not mainly related with the production by itself, but by improving the working space, by making something better, for example, related to pollution, having a better procedure to deal with.
Right. So basically, you're just saying that there are other ways to address these problems.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is a threat to me. My concern is that the emphasis on stakeholder capitalism or stakeholder, profit seeking, so seeking gains for not just the actual owners, it's really a violation of property rights. It's a fundamental misunderstanding of the fact that companies have owners, right? This watch, it's mine, right? A company belongs to the people who invest the money in it. It's their company. And other people don't seem to respect that. And this is why, as I said, I just think it's such an important article you've written. And there's a great quote in here from Adam Smith, because one of the crazy things that these stakeholder capitalism proponents are using is they're trying to put forward the idea that they're somehow carrying the legacy of Adam Smith, which is out of control. And I want to just read a very short quote here from The Wealth of Nations. That is where the term invisible hand comes from. And this is where an emergent order promotes an end which was no part of his intention. So a man seeks to make profits, to improve his existence, and yet by doing that, he improves the broader economy. In contrast to that, the meddling, this is what Adam Smith has to say about this. Quote, "I have never known much good done by those who affected to trade for the public good." Because we enter the land of la-la land, really, of just very unclear guidelines. And even now, we had a previous episode on ESG, or investing. This is this environmental, social governance investing, and how there's such a lack of clear metrics. Okay, so I went on a bit of a ramble there. But when the proponents of stakeholder capitalism get rolling or get their ideas implemented, what mandates or changes do they actually want? Let's be more precise here.
For example, in the Business Roundtable, they proposed 5 explicit points. So they are to deliver value to the customers, to invest in employees, to deal ethically with supplies, support their communities and protect the environment, and finally generate long-term value for shareholders.
The Gold Newsletter podcast is proudly sponsored by the Discovery Group of Exploration and Development Companies. To learn more about our exceptional track record and exciting future, visit discoverygroup.ca.
Hello, welcome to our weekly interview with the Discovery Group, which is the proud sponsor of the Gold Newsletter podcast. Each episode, as you all know, we get to know more about each Discovery Group company. I am Daniel Duarte, editor of this podcast, and today I'm pleased to have with me again Brandon Macdonald. He is the CEO and director of Fireweed Zinc, a Canadian mining exploration and development company focused on the Macmillan Pass project in the Yukon territory. The company is listed on the TSX Venture Exchange, so if you're interested in investing, check it out. Brandon, welcome back.
Thanks very much.
Just a couple of weeks have passed since our last interview, but recent events make it seem like a lot longer. With all that is going on with the spread of the coronavirus and containment measures, has it led your company to revise plans for 2020 or do something differently? How are you coping with those risks?
I think, that's the old expression, the market tells you how fast to go, on your project. And any venture-funded company without cash flow is reliant on the public markets to provide capital to advance an asset. And in a market like this, I just don't see an abundance of capital being available for base metal markets or base metal companies soon. So that means we're going to have to slow down. Right now, how much is TBD, but I certainly think the expectation is to slow things down. And then specifically, in a isolated mining camp, do you have to be cautious about introducing people who might have coronavirus potentially? I guess we'll see where we're at in June and what the trajectory of infections is.
Right. But you did put out a press release earlier this month about an agreement you reached with the local indigenous community to upgrade infrastructure near the project. What is the significance of that agreement and what exactly have you committed to?
So the agreement was actually between the government and the First Nations. So what it was a $71 million commitment from the government to provide upgrades in terms of surfacing, bridges, safety, etc., on two roads that go to the First Nations community and then onto our project. So this is the Robert Campbell Highway and the North Canal Road. So this is critical for us because when we did our preliminary economic assessment, we costed about $100 million into our capex to improve the Canal Road to make it ready to haul concentrate trucks. Now, what this $71 million does, part of which is going to the Canal Road, is immediately alleviate some of our capex for the project. And so that's an immediate, hard, tangible benefit, which would have a material impact on the economics of the project. But then what this also shows from a softer perspective is what I've been talking about, which is that the government, particularly in Yukon, is supportive of resource projects, does help fund infrastructure access to mining projects. And it also shows that the First Nations local to our project in that community have some implicit support for the concept of the project because they're working with the government to get our access improved.
And when we last spoke, you mentioned that the Yukon government has been very supportive of resource development in the area because that also promotes economic activity in the local communities. How are these communities benefiting from resource development in your area, specifically Macmillan Pass?
Well, so immediately in the short term, this $71 million funds the improvement of the road to that community to be paved. And that is the first time this community has had access via paved highway, right? So this was the last road accessible community in Yukon to not have paved road access. So still literally a dirt and gravel road to drive to the community. So as a supporter of this infrastructure funding, as kind of the industry proponent of this, one of the immediate benefits they're seeing is that, access to mines also can improve access to the community. And then what they also see is, obviously should a project like ours go ahead, you have immediately jobs, obviously, and you also have increased economic activity. And I'm not exactly sure what the multiplier for mining is. I think it's 1.5, 2 or something like that. So for every 100 million that the mine generates, another perhaps 50 to 100, of ancillary business is generated in the local and surrounding communities. So that's huge, right? For a community that is economically depressed and needs opportunities, that is critical.
Especially nowadays, we are going to need, stable jobs with all the situation still evolving.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Brandon, thank you so much for your time today and for updating us on Fireweed Zinc and its opportunities.
Thank you.
Yeah, I read through that as well. And it's very confusing because it's a political statement, basically. Because who says that profit-seeking companies don't deliver value to customers? Of course they do, right? That's what Walmart has been doing for 50 years. They invest in their employees. Of course, you want employees who are productive. Deal ethically with suppliers. If you're an unethical businessman, you or company, you will lose your suppliers. People won't want to trade with you. Support your communities and protect the environment. This is where it gets a little bit hazy because obviously you don't know what exactly is meant by that. And generate long-term value for shareholders. Well, that's the whole original idea to begin with, that you want to have revenue streams, and that's what generates a shareholder value. And there's a great mention here from the University of Chicago professor Luigi Zingales. I'm not sure how you pronounce that one, but he called this at best misleading marketing, at worst a dangerous power grab. That's a wonderful summation of what is going on here. And he is in the Booth Chicago School of Business, or Chicago Booth. And I can't remember the name of his organization right now, but he has a wonderful podcast of his own, Capital Isn't. And he also working or researching with a great center there. Now, what do you foresee actually coming of this woke capitalism? And is just woke capitalism, is that just the same thing as stakeholder capitalism? What do you actually see coming of these campaigns? Is it just going to be a lot of talk that doesn't actually eventuate? Or do you see laws coming into place that are going to further cripple the productivity and capacity of businesses?
Yes, in fact, as you said, these 5 points sounds like a public policy, just in the part of private CEOs of companies. And at the end, we are looking in some countries that governments are implemented these kind of laws that are making more difficult for companies, especially small and medium companies, to comply with them. And in the second part, I guess that it is not very easy to just go ahead and make this a real statement and a real compliance in part of companies, because at the end you will have to reform plenty of things, as you were talking about the metrics related to social and environment parameters, as companies have now for financial metrics. Now, as you were saying, at the end, companies right now deliver value for customers, take care about their employees, and deal in a good way with suppliers, because if not, they are going to lose these suppliers. And well, people and companies are increasingly more interested about taking care of the environment. We are looking that in some ways there is a reality and that we have to be more responsible with it, but not necessarily by following and creating new laws, but just by having the initiative. And in fact, investors and customers now value more if you take care more about the environment than before.
There's one other element here that maybe we haven't touched upon, and this ties in your work in Ecuador, which I am sure you should share with listeners. That is the way that free enterprise benefits the poorest among us. And you in Ecuador have focused on what's known as the informal economy, or the gray market economy, where people are trading but they don't have clear property rights, contracting is difficult, and they don't have access to credit or financial markets. So you're trying to make these informal markets and bring them into formality so they can better participate and engage in capitalism. So why are you doing this? What are the projects going on with Libre Razón in Ecuador?
Yes, in fact, Latin America and here in Ecuador, you can see a lot of results of having protectionist policies, and first writing the policy and the legislation, and then trying to make companies and small businesses adhere to them. Here in Quito, we are working with Libre Razón in a long-term project. We began 1 year ago by interviewing informal people that works in the informal economy, informal entrepreneurs in different cities of the country, and trying to understand more about their life, their daily operations, just by listening to their stories. And at the end, we made an exhibition with photographs and the stories, and also we write a report about what we have listened to in their stories, and also doing a lot of research about the economic conditions. And right now we are trying to approach to different municipalities and talk about the stories we listened, the insights we got, and also what solutions we can propose. Basically, the solutions we propose are free markets, free economy, and less regulations, more flexibility. Because at the end, we face, like in Ecuador, we face a lot of restrictions, a lot of red tape that makes very difficult for small entrepreneurs to just become formal, to get a loan, to make better their business.
I wanted to get to this because, to me, this is where the rubber meets the road. We have these bourgeois or wealthy people who are enjoying the fruits of capitalism, whereas the people in Ecuador who are struggling are saying, you know what, we would like that too. So what exactly do these entrepreneurs in Ecuador really need? Because they're the people we're talking about. They're the ones who are struggling or they're poor. And how does that compare with what the people in Davos, Switzerland are talking about? Because, for example, let's look at the proposals, which are in green policies, diversity hiring, quotas for women, unions, minorities in executive and management boards. Why are these not appealing to the entrepreneurs in Ecuador?
Well, first, we have two common phrases that they were answering us when we asked them what you need from the government, or what you need to have more freedom to work. I don't know. And what they were telling us is that first, they want freedom to work, to operate, to buy and sell and provide the services they provide. And second, they want clear rules, because
they cannot understand the law.
Yeah, and every time it changes, so there is no legal certainty.
Sure.
And they were two things. And also, we were interviewing one guy in Santo Domingo, that is a city between the coast and the highlands. And he sold a lot of things that he imported from Peru. And he told us that he wouldn't be a public servant or an employee, because in that way he earns more than what he earns with the minimum wage. So I guess I'm telling you this story because at the end they do not feel comfortable with the protectionist rules that the state applies in order to allegedly provide a better life for the poorest. Another story is that, for example, one lady was previously working in the established places to sell fruits.
Yes.
And at the end, she decided to just go away from this place because it was so far of the city that no one went to purchase the fruit there.
So she was going to a zoned area for fruit sales and decided, forget it, I'm just going to go illegally where I want to.
Yes, she had to pay like $2 for going there per month. But at the end, the problem was that no one was buying the fruits there. So I think that even if these are government policies, this is similar to the Davos and the Business Roundtable guidelines, in the sense that these are the rich people that are trying to imagine a perfect world or a better world from their desks or from their comfortability, and maybe they are disregarding even how they arrive to where they are right now. And it's basically with flexibility and freedom.
Yeah, the challenge is, of course, that in these first world countries, they take for granted the wealth that has been accumulated over many generations, and also a sense of legal certainty that does not exist in these less developed or emerging economies. And that, as you said, that's what people want. They want clearer rules so they can better comply, and less burdensome ones, because the more complicated and burdensome you make compliance, the more people just become informal. And that's why half the working population in Argentina, for example, is informal on the gray market. Okay, Paz, I know you can follow you on Twitter. Where else should people go to learn more about your work or hear you speak? You do interviews and you give speeches. How can they follow your work?
Yes, I am in Twitter as Paz en Libertad. I'm also in LinkedIn as Paz Gómez. You can find me there. And I am also in Instagram, where you can see also I publish all my articles, and you can see more about my speeches. I am there as M Paz Gómez M.
Right. And just before we wrap this up, listeners, if you want to get a bonus offer from Gold Newsletter, it's just goldnewsletter.com/bonus. And that gives you 2 mining stock picks from Brian London. Also, you will then receive the weekly Golden Opportunities newsletter, which gives further economic insights. So that's goldnewsletter.com/bonus. Otherwise, Paz, I appreciate the great work you're doing. Thanks for giving your time.
Thanks so much, Fergus. Bye.
Great.